What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Cal bringing you another video on your channel today. Yeah, sing it with me, baby. How you guys doing? What's going on? Today we're going to be talking about losing your sense of self. And what does this mean? Your identity. And you may not even be aware of this. You may not even be conscious of it. What you think about yourself and what you think about yourself kind of in the third person. So it is ultimately an imaginary, illusional state that causes each and every single one of us, including myself, a great deal of suffering. And this is something I came across while meditating today, and I think it's a great topic to talk about because it's something I'm trying to do ultimately by not trying. And this essentially means applying the knowledge that I've gained, and essentially I am losing my sense of self, losing that illusional identity that has caused me a great deal of suffering, right? My identification with whatever Cal is, whatever the identification with all this content in my life that has happened from the day I've been born to the day right here, right now. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. So yes, losing your sense of self. And I know this may be scary. I know this may seem like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. I don't want to stop thinking. I don't want to continue to suffer. And listen, I know it may sound bad what I'm saying, but trust me, it is the way to freedom. It is the way to never suffer again. And you will suffer again, but you inflict a great deal of suffering on yourself by identifying with these standards, with these expectations, with all this content in your life. Because if you don't live up to that content, you're going to feel this big gap of disappointment, and ultimately that's what causes suffering. Your identification with all this stuff in your life that is ultimately not you. Act like it is you. And listen, I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. I'm here to tell you what you need to hear, okay? And this is a message for myself as well, because I find myself a lot of times naturally falling back into that habit of thinking about myself as Cal, thinking about myself in the third person, and I'm creating this imaginary identity through my thoughts. And essentially I'm like, I got a 4.0 this past semester, and if I continue, and that's great, you know, that's amazing, but if I continue to put that pressure on myself, be like, I gotta live up to that standard, live up to that standard, so the next semester comes around and I don't get that 4.0, I'm gonna feel this huge gap of disappointment. Essentially, by releasing that standard, that expectation of getting a 4.0, I can relieve myself of all this pressure, and ultimately by thinking not out of the moment, but in the moment more, and use thinking as a tool rather than something that is me. This is a lot of times where people fall prisoner to their mind because they feel as though they have to perform these certain actions, they have to act a certain way in order to achieve this standard that within that moment is ultimately imaginary. And this is one of the greatest things that never gets talked about. Do not fall prisoner to your mind. There is such thing as external freedom, and there is such thing as internal freedom. You may not be able to gain financial freedom. That is very hard to do, but you can gain internal freedom right here, right now. It does not require any knowledge. It does not require any information. All it requires you to do is enter a state of effortlessness and take a step back, because when you do that, you can begin to watch and observe all of these thoughts, all these identifications that you make. And it's amazing to me how I fall back into this habit constantly. And by me constantly falling back into it, I'm reinforcing it and it's becoming more alive. But luckily, since I'm aware of it and I'm able to recognize it, I'm able, to start to move into what I'm reading right now, total meditation, where not just sitting on the floor meditating for 20 minutes, observing my thoughts 24/7 every single day. And this is the key to unlocking the door to salvation and to never suffer again, because you can see the darkness, you can see the unconscious, and that unconscious entails how much you inflict yourself by enhancing situations. So like I just talked about in my COVID video, a lot of individuals, right, they get COVID, right, they get sick physically, but then they enhance it through their mind, identifying with a certain perspective on top of what's already there. So that perspective, right, on top of that truth that's already happen creates this whole entire other scenario and circumstance that's ultimately illusional. And if they were able to take a step back, they would release that pressure, just like earlier, and enter a better state of mind. And when we begin to release this sense of self, right, when we begin to stop thinking about ourselves in the third person, whether regarding a certain scenario at work, at home, with a family member, a relationship with a partner, we begin to enter the real, and we do not enhance the situation by entering an out of the moment perspective, and we're able to enter an in the moment perspective, and we can really see what's going on. And when we see what's really going on with our third eye clearly, right, rather than just these two eyes, right, and just listening to whatever our mind says, right, adhering to whatever commands it's telling us to believe in, right, when you begin to become more conscious of what your mind says, you allow yourself to not believe what your mind is saying. And I know that sounds complicated, and I know that sounds crazy, but ultimately and simply put, it is just you taking a step back and watching your mind, right? Watching the thoughts coming in, watching the words coming in, because it is ultimately not you. And if you can realize that, you can save yourself so much trouble, and you can save yourself by not attaching and creating tension within your life. I find myself doing this on a daily basis, where I attach to things such as school, such as a transaction and interaction with another individual, and I enhance the situation by thinking about it constantly. That it takes up my attention, and my attention is essentially my perception, right? And then my perception becomes distorted. You can save your perception and your reality by being more in the moment, because like I say always, nothing around you is hurting you. Nothing around you wants you to feel that suffering. It is ultimately you. It is your fault. And I know that may be hard to hear, but it is that sense of self. It is that illusional identity that you create. So therefore, if you're able to lose that identity, if you're able to enter a more in the moment identity, right, that you're not even thinking about, that's ultimately who you are, and you're not thinking, you can enter a state of peace. You can enter a state of euphoria, zen, whatever you want to call it, and you connect with everything around you because you are whole and complete already. Lose your sense of self, man. It is one of the best things you can do for yourself. It may be hard right now, but ultimately, the more you become aware of this, the more you'll be able to save yourself in the long run, right? And because if you attach to something now, within the future, I'm just saying this like hypothetically, you will have suffering. And if you could save yourself that attachment, right, by detaching, you can save yourself a lot of time and freaking energy, okay? So with all that being said, love yourself because I love you, baby. And yeah, peace the fuck